It's election time in Turkey. Many are calling it the toughest test for Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He's ruled for 2 decades now. He has single-handedly changed Turkey's DNA. It was a progressive, secular country. Now it's more orthodox and Islamist. Erdogan has survived many challenges in the past, even survived a coup attempt in 2016. But this time, the challenge is different. The economy is bad, the global outlook is gloomy, and Western allies are fed up with him. So the opposition has sensed a chance. They think there is a genuine possibility of unseating him. We'll get to the political battle. But first, the basic facts. There are 2 candidates you should know about. One is obviously Erdogan. The other is Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. He's a combined opposition candidate. 6 parties in the opposition have come together and they've nominated this man. The voting will happen on the 14th of May. If any candidate gets more than 50% votes, then the job is done. He will become the next president of Turkey. If not, there will be a second round. Around 64 million people are registered to vote. 3.4 million of them live abroad. They too can vote for the president. The opinion polls are predicting a second round. But most of them show Erdogan trailing. His biggest challenge seems to be the economy. Inflation is at 44%, and Erdogan's policies have made it worse. Instead of raising interest rates, he lowered them. Why? Because Islamic law prohibits interest. As a result, the national currency collapsed. The lira lost 44% of its value in 2021. 2 years later, it is yet to recover. Then in February, a devastating earthquake struck Turkey. The losses ran up to $84 billion. That's almost 10% of the country's GDP. So the people of Turkey have suffered a lot. And they're hoping this man can turn it around. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, think about everything you know about Erdogan. Now flip it. You get Kılıçdaroğlu. They're simply worlds apart. Erdogan is a career politician. Kılıçdaroğlu is a career bureaucrat. Erdogan is an Islamist. Kılıçdaroğlu is a staunch secularist. Erdogan is hard on the West. Kılıçdaroğlu is pro-West. So the result of this election will have massive consequences, not just for Turkey, but also for the rest of the world. If Erdogan loses, the country could go back to having a parliament. You see, Turkey became a presidential country in 2017. Before that, it had a parliament. It also had a prime minister. The opposition wants to bring that back. They're also committed to joining the European Union. Kılıçdaroğlu is promising, quote-unquote, true democracy in Turkey. But knowing Erdogan, it won't be easy. He's trying to campaign on his terms, not the opposition's. Recently, he called the opposition gay. I know it sounds crass, but there is a political message there. Erdogan is trying to rally his orthodox base. He wants to depict Kılıçdaroğlu as pro-LGBTQ. And that's not all. On Tuesday, he increased the salary of government workers by 45%. Not suspicious at all. These tactics betray Erdogan's fears. He knows there's a genuine possibility that he may lose. And what happens then? Will Erdogan peacefully hand over power? He's ruled this country since 2002. He's tamed the army, the state media, and most government organs. So we can't rule out a power struggle. How should India see this high-stakes contest? Well, Erdogan certainly has not been India's friend. He has peddled Pakistan's narrative on Kashmir. He even raised it in United Nations platforms. But will Kılıçdaroğlu be any different? He hasn't spelled out his India policy yet. But we can be sure of one thing. It can't possibly be worse than Erdogan's. If the opposition wins this weekend, it would change global strategic alliances. Russia would lose a key partner in Eurasia, NATO would get back its shaky ally, and Europe would find a friendly regime at its border. We'll be tracking these results closely. Now let's look at what's happening in Thailand. We told you yesterday about the upcoming election. Today we'll focus on a major issue that's dividing Thai voters, marijuana. That's right. Political parties are sparring over the future of weed in Thailand. They legalized marijuana last year. Well, sort of. The government made a technical move. It removed cannabis from Thailand's narcotics list. So it's technically not illegal anymore. But there are no ground rules on growing and consuming weed. Before the government could work on those, it was disbanded for the election. And this regulatory vacuum has triggered a debate. How should weed be handled in Thailand? That's what political parties can't agree on. And believe it or not, it has become a major election issue in the country. Here's a report.
Thailand is going to polls on Sunday. It's a tough election for the military junta and Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha. A lot of Thai people are sick of their economic mismanagement. However, one issue may work out in their favor: marijuana. Yes, believe it or not, Thailand's marijuana legalization may benefit the military. Here's how. Last year, Thailand removed cannabis from its narcotics list. It was done by the ruling coalition under General-turned-PM Chan-o-cha. His coalition included local parties from regions in Thailand that grow cannabis. So, cannabis was no longer illegal. But there were no real laws surrounding its cultivation and sale. No one was sure what was allowed and what wasn't. And to no one's surprise, people took advantage of the legal grey area. Marijuana dispensaries started cropping up everywhere, both medical and otherwise. People were selling joints, edibles, and everything in between. Tourists were flocking to Thailand like never before. But there's always a dark side, like children having easy access to marijuana. Cops shaking down tourists who didn't know they couldn't smoke weed in public. It was bedlam. It still is. And people want to know what's allowed and what's not.
I think they should be more clear about the rules about weed, cannabis, and how people can smoke inside or not. Just make more clear about the rules. Because right now it's like 50-50 about everything. So
the government was going to pass legislation to regulate cannabis this year, but they faced resistance in parliament. Eventually, the government's term lapsed ahead of the upcoming polls. It was disbanded before it could pass marijuana regulation laws. So the next government will have to take care of it, and Thailand's political parties are in a fix. Despite its reputation as a tourism hub, Thailand, especially rural Thailand, is a conservative place. There has been public outrage over images of stoned children. Some sections of people are afraid of what legalizing cannabis will do to Thai society. Of course, there are voices on the opposite side of the fence, like farmers who grow marijuana. Many believe that the crop is their cash cow. They're backing their local parties who have promised to make weed legal and expand the industry. At the national level, the biggest parties are in a bind. Both of the parties leading in polls are courting the youth vote. These are the Pure Thai Party and the Move Forward Party. They have projected themselves to be the change makers. Move Forward in particular is fueled by young, hopeful voters. But both the PTP and Move Forward have said legalization happened too soon, that it needs to be reined in. And this has spooked some voters.
I think one of the reasons that people doesn't actually invest in cannabis right now, or they didn't put that much effort in cannabis, is that they're not certain that the industry is going to stay for long, right? So they're not going to invest millions in something that, say, if we have next elections, we're gonna go back into having all this into something illegal again. So people don't invest.
Ironically, in this debate, it's the largest military-backed parties that are seen as progressive. That's mostly because they've maintained a studied silence on the topic of cannabis. The studied silence, plus the fact that they were in power when weed was legalized, Thailand's junta might capture some of the rebellious youth vote.
Our next story is about the Islamic State, a jihadist group of terrorists infamous for beheadings, mass killings and abductions. The ISIS has found a new target, and that is Russia. But why Russia? And how is the ISIS targeting Russia? Well, not with weapons yet. For now, they're using propaganda tools. The ISIS has launched a media campaign in their weekly newsletter. Yes, they have one. And this campaign slams Russia on the war in Ukraine. Again, the question is why? Our next report has the answers.
The ISIS is now targeting Russia, but not in the way you would imagine. They're targeting Russia with propaganda tools. Simply put, a media campaign. And it all started with the Islamic State's weekly newsletter. It's called Al-Naba, and it came into action shortly after the war in Ukraine began. ISIS calls Russia an orthodox crusader. One article in the newsletter even made an appeal to God, asking for Russia's wars to be bloody. The media campaign says the war is Russia's punishment, wrath of the gods. Against what? Apparently, escalation of the competition between Russia and America, because they want to take control of Eastern European countries. Now, Al-Naba seems to have moved on from this. But other pro-ISIS media groups have really clung to it. They have continued the discussion. But the question is, why is ISIS targeting Russia this way? Now, Russia may be a new target for the terrorist group, but it's a familiar enemy. ISIS hasn't forgotten about the Soviet-Afghan war. It was a decade-long war with a bloody legacy. So there's historical hatred. But the anger is not reserved for the past. It also stems from more recent events, like the Syrian civil war. It was a drawn-out, bloody war during which Russia assisted Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad. It provided air support that targeted areas with a Sunni stronghold, not easily forgivable for the ISIS. Then there's Russia's relations with the Taliban, which they've worked on for years now. Russia wants to establish contact with the Taliban. It's been lobbying with them. Reports say Russia wants to gain access to Afghanistan. And why would the Taliban help them? For international support. All in all, Russia seems like a worthy enemy for ISIS, a good enough target to be fought with propaganda. But why is ISIS going after Russia now? Maybe we should look at the timing. The war in Ukraine has dragged on longer than Russia expected. It's possible that the ISIS wants to test Russia's strength. But how is this media offensive going to help the ISIS? This is all speculation. It could be that ISIS wants to incite Muslims. Maybe highlighting these socio-political problems will attract supporters. They want to show Russia as the enemy of Islam. And for now, these actions may seem harmless, but this propaganda clearly does not lack a goal. And if anything, it could be a warning, a declaration of intent to go after Russia. There is a message here for other countries too. There's a power vacuum in Afghanistan since the US left. Countries like Russia, Iran, and China have been trying to fill it. But if they do, they might have to face the anger of ISIS.
Now let's turn our attention to another demagogue. Donald Trump, former US president, now found guilty of sexual abuse. The case was filed by journalist E. Jean Carroll. She said Donald Trump raped her in 1996. Now the jury has found that he sexually abused her. Not the same as rape, but a significant verdict nonetheless. Trump has been asked to pay Carroll $5 million in damages, and this is a civil case, so he won't go to jail. But it's quite an indictment. Although Trump has called it a witch hunt and a disgrace. The question is, how will it impact his presidential bid? He wants to run for president in the 2024 election. Being found guilty of sexual abuse may not help, but then again, this is America, so we can't be sure of what will happen. Also, Trump tends to benefit from such episodes. You may remember what happened in the month of March. He became the first former US president to be indicted in a criminal case. This was about a porn star. Her name is Stormy Daniels. Trump paid her money to keep her quiet. They call it hush money. He made the payment, but did not show it in his books. So he was indicted. Now he's been found guilty of sexual abuse. Of course, he's denied all the charges. Throughout these cases, in fact, his demeanor was typical Trump, full of vitriol. Let me show you something from his deposition in October last year. It's just been made public. Take a look at this.
I still don't know this woman. I think she's a whack job. I have no idea. I don't know anything about this woman other than what I read in stories and what I hear. I know nothing about her, but I know nothing about her. I think she's sick, mentally sick. She said that I did something to her that never took place. There was no anything. I know nothing about this nut job.
He called her a whack job, nut job, and mentally sick. Charming. Of course, this isn't the first time that Trump has been found being vulgar while describing women. There was a famous Access Hollywood tape that went viral before the 2016 presidential election. Trump was in a bus talking about his disgusting acts. That tape did not stop him from becoming the president of the US. But it may have helped nail him in this rape trial. He was questioned about it, and his answer was distasteful, to say the least.
I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. Just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything. That's what you said, correct?
Well, historically, that's true with stars.
It's true with stars that they can grab women by the pussy?
Well, that's what it's. If you look over the last million years, I guess that's been largely true. Not always, but largely true. Unfortunately or fortunately.
Fortunately, really. As you can imagine, the jury unanimously declared Trump guilty of sexual abuse. But that isn't the end of the sordid saga. Trump, of course, is going to appeal.
Yeah, I mean, look, strange verdict. This was a rape claim. It was a rape case all along, and the jury rejected that, but made other findings. So we'll obviously be appealing those other findings. And at the end of the day, while, you know, it was strange, part of me was obviously very happy that Donald Trump was not branded a rapist. I didn't think there should be any liability findings, so we'll pursue it. We'll pursue that.
He says he's happy Trump wasn't branded a rapist. So sexual abuser is a badge of honor? The sick part is that it might be for his voter base. Trump's Access Hollywood tape was actually lauded by some of his supporters. They've dismissed his Stormy Daniels hush money case as politically motivated, and most likely this one too will be defended by his rabid fan base. After the verdict, Donald Trump put out this statement on his social media platform. It's called Truth Social. He set it up after being removed from Twitter. Trump says the judge in this case was biased. He says the venue of the trial was completely partisan and that it was the greatest political witch hunt of all time. What Donald Trump did not mention is that he was found guilty by the jury, a jury made up of ordinary people. Will American voters see past the sea of excuses next year? Trump probably believes so. He's shown no indication that he'll step out of the presidential race. For our last story tonight, let's talk about parenting. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but thanks to medical science now, it can also take the DNA of 3 parents to have one. That's right, DNA from 3 individuals to produce one baby. And the procedure can be life-saving. We're talking about 3-parent babies. It is a real thing. And the UK just got its first such baby, although it's not a new phenomenon. The first 3-parent baby was born in the year 2016. And since then, many more have been brought to life. This only goes on to show how far science has come. But the procedure is not without risks. Here's a report.
Mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. How many times did you learn that in school? The effort that went into learning it is inversely proportional to the use of this knowledge. After all, mitochondria facts aren't really a party starter. But for this story, they will come in handy. Because we're going to talk about 3-parent babies. You heard that right. Not 1, not 2, but 3-parent babies. Here's how. Babies, like all organisms, are made of DNA. And the DNA of children comes from their parents. So, with 3-parent babies, the process is the same. Except instead of 2, 3 parents give their DNA. The father who gives the sperm, the mother who gives the egg, and a female donor. So what does this female donor give? Her DNA. Then a baby will be born like in any IVF birth. That's in vitro fertilization, where the embryo forms outside the womb in a lab dish, and then is placed inside the womb of the mother. And this process is called mitochondrial donation treatment. But you may wonder, if the mother is already offering an egg, why is another woman's DNA required? And why only a woman donor? This is where mitochondria come in. What's that, you ask? Mitochondria are like tiny compartments. They're inside nearly every cell of our body. They convert food into usable energy, at least the decent ones. But sometimes they malfunction. And the defective mitochondria are really bad for the body. They not only fail to give us energy, but can cause brain damage, heart failure, blindness, and muscle wasting. These diseases are incurable and genetic, so they pass on to children. About 1 in 6,000 babies are born with mitochondrial diseases every year. And it's fatal to them, most dying within hours of their birth. so families have lost multiple children to this. So obviously, parents want to protect their babies from this. And for them, this method is the only solution. People inherit all their mitochondria from a woman, and that's why they need the genes of a third female donor, even if only 0.1% of the baby's genes come from her, because this brings in the donor's healthy mitochondria, not the faulty ones, and a healthy baby is born, which is exactly what's happened in the UK. For the first time in history, a 3-parent baby has been born. But this isn't the first such case in the world. In 2016, a 3-parent baby was born in Mexico. In 2017, another was born to parents in Ukraine. And in 2019, a similar case was seen in Greece. So the science is clearly picking up across the world, but at a slow pace, because it isn't without risks. This technique is fairly new. There are health concerns, which is why it's banned in countries like America and Canada. Then there are ethical and moral concerns because it's tweaking natural biology. In a few cases, the process is unsuccessful too. But while the concerns are valid, there are also the consequences of not making use of this technique. Because for thousands of families, this is their only hope. What we need is balance. How to achieve it is the challenge. So, Three's company or crowd? The choice is yours.
And there they go. It looks like
The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting. Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony.